Welcome back to CJ Does. I'm CJ, and this is my channel where I show off all the fun things that I do. Last time on the channel, I made this Giant D20, which isn't really all that giant. The seams aren't all that great. The numbers have all come off, and it's just kind of held together with hot glue. So we need to make it bigger and better. So this time, I'm going to show you how I made this gianter D20 with better seams, better connections, better numbering, and just better overall. So let's get to the work table and I'll show you how I made this. So one of the first things I wanted to do when making this bigger, better D20, and we still made it out of foam core, was I made this tool here, which is a 3D printed blade holder. So you can see there it holds a blade for a X-Acto knife. So this is a number 7 X-Acto knife blade, and it fits right in that little slot that I designed. And then this cover fits right over that. And I can use two little screws that I have here, hex head screws that just kind of screw in to hold the cap on the top. And this was 3D printed in 2 parts, so these will hold together with these little screws that'll hold it together. And then the blade slips right into that little slot right on the top there. And this is so that I can hold the blade and I can adjust the blade's depth into the foam board. And then this extra little screw right here, which is the same size hex head as the other ones, is a retaining screw that just screws down and then prevents, see, the blade from moving out of it. And then if you just loosen it a little bit, just like a quarter turn back, the blade moves freely up and down, so we can adjust the depth and then tighten it back down and get that depth exactly where I want it. And what's important about this is that it's set to the angle for cutting the perfect seams for these D20 sides. So the next step was to trace out all of the triangles that are going to make up all of the sides for the D20. And to do this, I just printed out some triangles on some just regular plain paper. I didn't do anything fancy. I could have done this with some chipboard or some heavier cardstocks to make it a little bit easier, but I just traced some triangles out and then traced them onto the foam board with a Sharpie marker to get the outlines that I was going to use to cut it out later. And then once I had all of these traced out, I'm going to go and try and cut just a test cut with the 3D printed knife blade holder, just to make sure that I can get the angle, and you'll see that right here. So my first attempts were to try and cut these straight lines using a straight edge, and it worked at first, but it wasn't really that fast and it wasn't really that much better, and I had to go in with the utility knife to really clean up and finish the cuts. So I'm gonna try and move away from doing it that way, and I'm just gonna try and freehand it from now on. Do the rest of them freehand, just like this. And with 2 sides cut out, I can line them up and check that angle, see how the seams line up really nice and are going to be really great for when I'm assembling it, and it's going to be a nice even seam. So time to just continue and cut out the rest of the triangles for the sides of the D20, just freehanding it like I was on the other ones. with these all cut out, the next step was to add some holes to each of the triangles so that I could drive a screw into them and then use them to connect to these connectors that are going to hold the D20 together. So with 3 holes punched on one of them, I just went through and used that one as a template to guide a hole into all of the rest of it. And with all of the holes poked in each of these pieces, it's time to gather them up and gather all the pieces to connect them all together. So I have some 3D printed parts that I'm going to show that are the connectors, some 1024 half-inch long screws, and some 1024 coarse threaded nuts that we're going to use to keep these all together. The nuts are friction fit into these 3D printed connectors that I'm just going to use a pair of vice grips to add all these into them. And then you can see again, just using the vice grips, squeezing down and getting those inserted into the connector. And once I have all 12 of these done, it's time to move on to assembling the D20. So first thing I'm going to do is show you what 2 sides look like when they're attached to one of these connectors. So just using a screw and screwing this down, 1 triangle on the front with the screw through the holes I had poked previously. You can see I just screw it down and make sure it's nice and tight. And then take the next one and line the holes up, and then drive one of the screws through that part. And then take that screw and then attach it to the connector. And once those 2 are connected, you can line them up and see that the seam is nice and clean, much better than the other one. And then adding a second connector on the other side helps keep these 2 pieces from opening up and separating. And then once these pieces are connected to each other, I can go around and add 3 more to this connector and have 1 kind of end cap or top piece to the D20. With those 5 pieces connected, just adding on more sides here, using 2 screws to connect these together and get these kind of 5 more pieces added to this one. I figured it would be a great way to do this was to do this in 2 halves, kind of connect 5 on one connector and then add these pieces with 2 screws on each one, and then have 2 halves like that and connect those 2 halves together. this is a really fun project that I hope you're enjoying, and I'll continue here on the channel with larger and more significant D20s. If you like, be sure to like the video and subscribe to see more builds like this. I have plans for the next one to add some cool electronics and maybe some resin or LEDs to really make it stand out. Let me know in the comments if you have any ideas for what you'd like to see next. Maybe a full set of giant Dungeons and Dragons dice, a 7-piece set with a D4, a D6, D8, 12 percentile, a D10, and another giant D20. Be sure to hit the bell for notifications on upcoming videos. I have a lot of cool stuff planned for the future. With the first half completed, it's time to start working on the second half, so here I'm just building the cap end of the D20 that I'm going to start adding on, kind of the teeth-like section. It kind of looked like two jaws coming together with teeth near the end there when I was trying to assemble them. So remember when I said I thought it was a good idea to try and do this? Yeah, this did not work out exactly as I had thought it would, so it was actually a lot of wasted effort where I had to end up taking apart all of the pieces. I thought maybe if I just take one out, I could then kind of squeeze them all together, but no. I ended up having to take apart the entire side of the D20 and then try and reassemble it after that. So here I just have to take all the pieces off of the sides of this one half, and then I'm just going to attach the top and the bottom sections like this together, and that's going to make assembly a lot easier for the future. that all taken care of, I just have to add the last few sides onto the D20 and tighten down all the screws. To add the numbers to the die, I decided to go to my home vinyl cutter to cut out these numbers. I cut these out with a rectangle around the numbers so that I could decide if I wanted to use them as a stencil or if I was going to use them as the actual numbers for the die. I decided to use them as the actual number for the die. So I just needed to weed out all of the extra vinyl before I could add them to the die. With all the extra vinyl weeded out, I added some transfer tape to the back of all the numbers and then cut them out as individual numbers. To add the numbers, I just eyeballed the center of one of the faces, starting with the 20, and laid down the vinyl. This transfer tape was really strong, so I had to be really sure to burnish down the vinyl before removing it. Once the 20 was set, I moved on to all the other numbers. I had a small D20 next to me to make sure I got all the numbers in the correct orientation and place on the die. And with the final number added and the transfer tape off, we have a Giant D20 version 2.0. So that's how I built this bigger, better Giant D20. Be sure to like the video if you liked it, subscribe to see more videos on the channel, and hit the bell for notifications on upcoming videos. Also, check out the description for my social media and ways you can help support the channel, and be sure to come back and see all the things that CJ does. Thanks for watching.